Richard's nose was bleeding. He could taste copper on his lips as he knelt on his own living room floor, staring up at his 7 months pregnant wife, with an expression of pure disbelief. Diana stood over him, her breathing steady, her eyes colder than he'd ever seen them. In the corner, his mistress Jessica cowered, mascara streaking down her face. The front door burst open. 3 men entered, Diana's father and brothers, and Richard's blood turned to ice. Robert's weathered face showed no emotion, but his presence filled the room like a storm. The packed suitcases Richard had prepared to throw Diana out with still sat by the door mocking him. His phone buzzed repeatedly, business partners all cutting ties. In one devastating moment, Richard understood. The weak, fragile woman he'd spent months humiliating was a national martial arts champion. Her family were masters, and everything he'd built was because of them. But how did we get here? Let me take you back 3 months. Before we continue, let me ask you something quietly. Where are you listening from right now? And what time is it in your part of the world? Some of us are hearing this story under the hot afternoon sun. Some in the calm of the night, when thoughts are heavy and hearts are open. Different places, one story, one lesson. If stories like this speak to your heart, please subscribe to the channel. Your like helps this story reach another soul. Your comment tells me you understand the lesson. And when you share, you may be saving someone from the same mistake. Now, let us continue. Richard adjusted his Rolex as he walked through the door of his Lagos home, barely glancing at Diana as she struggled to rise from the couch. At 7 months pregnant, every movement was an effort, but he had no patience for weakness. Dinner isn't ready, he said flatly, loosening his tie. What have you been doing all day? Diana's hand instinctively went to her swollen belly. Richard, I told you this morning. The doctor said I need to rest. The baby. The baby, he mocked, heading to the bedroom. All you do is complain. My mother was working in the fields until the day she gave birth. You can't even manage a simple meal. 2 years ago, Diana had been different. Vibrant. Strong. She'd owned a thriving martial arts studio in Victoria Island, teaching self-defense to women and children. But Richard had insisted she close it after their wedding. A wife should focus on home, he'd said. Besides, what kind of woman fights? It's not feminine. She'd agreed because she loved him, because she wanted to build a family. Now she barely recognized herself. The sound of the door opening again made Diana look up. Margaret, Richard's mother, entered without knocking, her face already set in its usual expression of disapproval. Still sitting. Margaret clicked her tongue. In my day, pregnant women didn't behave like invalids. And where is my son's dinner? I'm sorry, Ma. I was just about to. You've been married 2 years and still no son. Only now you're finally pregnant, and who knows if this one will even be male. Margaret settled heavily into Richard's favorite chair. My son works so hard. He deserves better than a useless wife who can't even keep the house properly. Diana bit her lip, swallowing the words she wanted to say. The nausea that had plagued her for months rose again, but she forced it down. Richard emerged from the bedroom in fresh clothes, cologne heavy in the air. Going out? Diana asked quietly. Business dinner. Don't wait up. He didn't meet her eyes. After he left, Diana noticed the faint scent of perfume on his jacket. Not his cologne. Something floral and young. The next morning, her younger brother Peter arrived unannounced, carrying groceries. His eyes went immediately to the bruises on Diana's arms, dark fingerprints where Richard had grabbed her during their last argument. Diana. Peter's voice was tight. What is this? Nothing. I just bumped. Don't lie to me. He set down the bags carefully, his martial arts training evident in his controlled movements. Sister, does Papa know how he's treating you? Should I tell him? No. Diana's response was too quick, too desperate. Please, Peter. It's just, the pregnancy is stressful for both of us. He'll change once the baby comes. Peter studied her face, and she saw the doubt in his eyes. Their father Robert had trained them both since childhood. Diana had been the champion, the pride of the family. Peter had competed internationally. They came from warriors. You're not weak, Diana, Peter said softly. Don't let anyone make you forget that. After he left, Diana stood in front of the bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the exhausted woman staring back. Her phone rang. Richard. "I'm bringing someone to dinner tomorrow," he announced. "A business associate. Make sure the house is presentable. Cook something impressive." "Richard," the doctor said. The line went dead. Diana's hand trembled as she lowered the phone. Something in her husband's voice had changed. Something final. The next evening, Diana had prepared jollof rice, grilled fish, and plantains despite her exhaustion. When the doorbell rang, she smoothed her maternity dress and opened it with a welcoming smile. The smile died. Richard stood there with a young woman, beautiful, polished, carrying 2 large suitcases. Jessica. Diana had seen her photos on Richard's phone when he thought she wasn't looking. "Diana, this is Jessica," Richard said casually, walking past his wife. "She'll be staying with us temporarily. She needs a place and we have the space." Diana's mouth opened, but no words came out. Jessica breezed in, her expensive perfume filling the entryway. The same scent Diana had noticed on Richard's jacket. "What a lovely home," Jessica purred, her eyes scanning the space with proprietorial interest. "Richard has told me so much about it. Where should I put my things?" "Prepare the guest room," Richard ordered Diana, not as a request. "And bring Jessica something to drink. She's had a long day." For the next hour, Diana moved through her own home like a ghost, watching her husband and this woman laugh together, touching casually, while she served them the food she'd spent hours preparing. Jessica didn't even glance her way. "This rice is bland," Jessica commented. "I suppose pregnancy affects the taste buds?" Richard laughed. Diana's never been much of a cook anyway. That night, Diana lay alone in the guest room. Richard had given Jessica the master bedroom, because Diana needs to rest anyway, and the guest bed is fine for her condition. Through the walls she could hear their voices, their laughter. She called her father. "Papa," she whispered into the phone. I just needed to hear your voice." Robert's deep voice came through, steady as always. "Diana. What's wrong?" "Nothing. I'm just tired. Pregnancy is harder than I thought." A long pause. Her father had always been able to read her, even through silence. "Diana, you're my daughter. You're stronger than you remember. Don't forget who you are." Another pause. "If you need me, I'm here. Always." She hung up before she could break down completely. The next day, Margaret arrived and immediately embraced Jessica like a long-lost daughter. "Finally, someone who can help around here properly," she declared. "Diana, you should be grateful Jessica is here to take some burden off you." Diana watched from the kitchen doorway as Richard, Jessica, and Margaret sat together in the living room, talking and laughing. She was 7 months pregnant with Richard's child, and she'd become invisible in her own home. "Diana," Richard snapped. "Stop hovering and bring us tea." As she served them, Jessica placed her hand on Richard's thigh, bold and possessive. He didn't move it away. The neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, witnessed the scene through the open window as she passed by. Later, she pulled Diana aside in the compound. "Child, this is not right," Mrs. Thompson said, her aged face filled with concern. "What that man is doing under his own roof, with you carrying his baby, your father should know." "Please, Mrs. Thompson," Diana begged. "Don't tell anyone. I can handle it." But that night, Diana couldn't handle anything. She heard Richard and Jessica in the master bedroom. Her bedroom. Their voices intimate, their laughter cruel. Diana sat on the guest room bed, her hands on her belly, feeling her daughter kick. "I'm sorry," she whispered to her unborn child. "I'm so sorry. I want a divorce." Richard's words hung in the morning air like a death sentence. Diana stood in the kitchen, still in her nightgown, watching her husband pack her belongings into suitcases. "The baby stays," he continued casually, as if discussing the weather. "You can leave. Jessica and I have discussed it. She'll help raise the child properly." Diana's hand went to her belly protectively. "Richard, you can't be serious. This is our child. Our marriage is over." He zipped up the last suitcase and dragged it to the front door. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. You'll get nothing. My mother has agreed to testify that you've been an unfit wife." From the bedroom, Jessica emerged, wearing Diana's robe. She stretched lazily, smirking. "Morning, Diana. Don't worry. I'll take good care of everything here. Including Richard." Something crystallized in Diana's chest. Not anger. Something colder. "I'm not leaving," she said quietly. Richard's face darkened. He crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed Diana's arm, his fingers digging into the same bruises Peter had seen. "You'll do what I tell you. Let go of me." Her voice was different. Richard noticed it, but too late. He tried to drag her toward the door, and Diana stumbled, but she didn't fall. Instead, her body shifted, her weight redistributed with practiced precision. "Just go," Jessica laughed from across the room. "You're too weak to fight anyway." Richard shoved Diana hard toward the packed suitcases. She didn't move. His hand came up to push her again, and Diana's eyes changed. The broken, exhausted woman vanished. In her place stood someone else entirely, someone Richard had never seen before. Diana's hand moved. Fast. Precise. She blocked Richard's push, caught his wrist, twisted, and in one fluid motion, put her husband on his knees. His face contorted in pain and shock. "What? How did you?" Jessica screamed. Diana spoke, her voice eerily calm. "I won 3 national championships before you convinced me to quit. I trained with the military. My father trained special forces." She applied just enough pressure to keep Richard down. "I am not weak." Margaret burst from the guest room. "You dare raise your hand to my son?" She rushed forward, and Diana caught her with one hand, pressing a point on her shoulder that made Margaret freeze, not in pain but unable to move. "Sit down, Ma," Diana said quietly. "I won't hurt you. But you will listen." Richard tried to rush her again, rage overriding sense. Diana sidestepped, swept his legs, and he went down harder this time, his nose hitting the floor. Blood spattered on the tile. At that exact moment, the front door crashed open. Robert entered first, his presence commanding immediate attention. Behind him came Peter and Christopher, Diana's older brother. All 3 men moved with the controlled power of trained fighters. Mrs. Thompson stood in the doorway behind them, phone in hand. "I called them," she said simply. "I told them everything." Richard looked up from the floor, blood streaming from his nose, and saw Robert's face. The older man's expression was glacial. "So this is how you treat my daughter?" Robert's voice was soft, deadly. "This is how you treat the woman carrying your child?" Richard scrambled backward, finally understanding. The bruises on Diana's arms. Her brother's controlled movements. Robert's commanding presence. This wasn't just a family. This was a family of warriors. And he just tried to destroy their champion. Robert pulled out a chair and sat down slowly, deliberately. "Richard, sit." It wasn't a request. Richard, still bleeding, took the chair across from his father-in-law. Peter stationed himself by the door, cutting off any escape. Christopher stood behind Richard, silent and imposing. Diana remained standing, one hand on her belly, watching everything with that new, cold composure. "Do you know who I am?" Robert asked quietly. You're Diana's father. I trained National Defense Forces for 20 years. I trained police special units. I trained Olympic athletes." Robert leaned forward. "My daughter won 3 national championships before she was 25. She could have competed internationally. Do you know why she didn't?" Richard's mouth opened, closed. "Because she met you. Because you convinced her that martial arts wasn't feminine. That a wife should be soft, domestic, weak." Robert's voice never rose, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "You took a warrior and tried to turn her into a servant." Christopher spoke for the first time, his voice like gravel. "Your business, Richard. Who introduced you to the Adeyemi Group? The construction contracts in Lekki? The real estate deals in Ikoyi?" Richard's face went pale. You did. As a wedding gift," Robert confirmed. "I vouched for you. My reputation opened those doors. My name made men trust you." He pulled out his phone. "Watch." He made one call. Then another. Richard's phone started buzzing. Messages flooded in. Contract terminated. Partnership dissolved. Deal cancelled. No. Richard grabbed his phone with shaking hands. Every major deal you have came through my connections, Christopher said coldly. We just took them all back. Jessica, who had been frozen in the corner, suddenly moved toward the door. Peter stepped in front of her. You participated in this humiliation, Peter said quietly. You'll stay and hear everything. Robert turned his attention to Margaret, who was still unable to move from Diana's earlier technique. You raised a man who abuses a pregnant woman, who brings his mistress into the home while his wife sleeps in the guest room. Where is your honor? Margaret began to weep. Explain yourself, Robert commanded Richard. Why? Richard broke. The words tumbled out, his mother's constant pressure for a son, his insecurity about Diana's strength and accomplishments, his fear that she was more impressive than him. The infidelity had started as an ego boost, a way to feel powerful. Bringing Jessica home had been the ultimate assertion of control. I wanted. Richard's voice cracked. I wanted her to be weaker than me. Diana finally spoke. You had a wife who loved you, who gave up everything for you, who carried your child. Her hand rested on her belly. And you repaid that with cruelty. Robert stood. Here is what will happen. Diana and the baby will come home with us. You'll provide financial support, but you'll have no parental rights unless Diana chooses to grant them. You'll sign whatever papers we present. And if I refuse? Richard asked desperately. Then we go to family court. And everyone, every business associate, every friend, every person in this city will know exactly what you did. How you treated a pregnant woman. How your business was built on my name, then used to abuse my daughter. Robert's expression was granite. Choose. Richard looked around the room. His mother weeping. Jessica terrified in the corner. Diana's family standing like an immovable wall. His phone still buzzing with canceled deals. I'll sign, he whispered. Jessica tried once more to leave. Peter opened the door for her. Go. But know that everyone will hear what you participated in. Lagos is a small place for people like us. She fled. Margaret tried to speak to Diana to apologize, but Diana simply looked at her with empty eyes. You called me useless, Ma. You supported him bringing another woman into our home. There's nothing left to say. An hour later, Diana walked out of the house with her father and brothers. Richard stood in the doorway watching his wife, his warrior wife, leave with her head high while his entire life crumbled around him. The house felt enormous and empty. His phone finally stopped buzzing. Every message said the same thing. We no longer wish to do business with you. Richard sank to the floor and wept, but there was no one left to hear him. 3 months later, Diana stood at the front of her reopened martial arts studio in Victoria Island, demonstrating a defensive technique to a room full of women. Her daughter, Maya, slept peacefully in a carrier worn by Peter, who sat in the corner grading competition forms. Remember, Diana told her students, strength isn't just physical. It's knowing your worth. Never let anyone convince you that you're weak when you're not. The women watched her with something close to reverence. Word had spread about Diana. How she'd been a champion, how she'd reclaimed her power, how she now taught women to protect themselves. Her classes were booked months in advance. Outside, Richard sat in his aging car watching through the window. His Mercedes had been repossessed last month. The expensive suits had been sold. He now worked in sales at a telecommunications shop, barely making rent on a one-bedroom apartment in a forgotten part of Ikeja. The Lagos social scene had not been kind. Word had spread quickly about what he'd done, how he'd abused his pregnant wife, brought his mistress home, tried to steal his own child. His mother's church group had formally shunned Margaret. No one returned his calls. Old friends crossed the street to avoid him. He watched Diana laugh at something a student said, watched her move with that fluid grace he tried so hard to suppress. She was radiant, confident, everything she'd been before him and more. He'd come today because the court had granted him supervised visitation. Peter would allow him 15 minutes with Maya. Here at the studio, Diana saw him through the window and nodded once to Peter. No warmth, no anger, just acknowledgement. Richard entered quietly, aware of every eye on him. The women knew who he was. He could see it in their faces: disgust, contempt, pity. Peter handed him the baby but stayed close, watching. Maya was beautiful with Diana's eyes. She looked at Richard with infant curiosity, then turned away, reaching for Diana across the room. Even at 3 months old, she knew who her parent was. "She's healthy," Diana said neutrally, not approaching. "Growing well." "Diana, Richard's voice cracked. "I'm sorry. For everything. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please can we?" "No." Her voice was firm, final. "You didn't just underestimate me, Richard. You tried to destroy me when I was most vulnerable. You tried to take my child. You humiliated me in front of strangers." She paused. "My daughter will never learn to accept that treatment. That's the one good thing you'll give her. A lesson in what not to tolerate." Robert appeared in the doorway as if summoned. He looked older, more tired, but his presence still commanded the room. "You could have had a warrior queen as your wife," Robert said quietly. "My daughter was a prize, strong, loyal, accomplished. Instead, you wanted a servant. You wanted someone small so you could feel big." He shook his head. "Now you have neither. And you never will again." Maya started to fuss. Diana took her daughter smoothly from Richard's arms, and the baby immediately calmed. The message was clear. Even the child knew where she belonged. "Your 15 minutes are up," Peter said. Richard walked out of the studio, past the women who watched him with cold eyes, into the bright Lagos afternoon. He stood on the sidewalk, watching through the window one last time as Diana returned to teaching, Maya content in her arms, surrounded by family and students who respected her. Everything he destroyed had been rebuilt, without him. Richard learned too late that strength isn't just physical. It's knowing when to be gentle and when to stand firm. He saw weakness where there was grace, and silence where there was power. He thought he could control a warrior by taking away her armor, not realizing that her strength came from within. In trying to break his wife, he broke himself. His business crumbled. His reputation shattered. His mother lost her standing in the community. The woman he'd brought in to replace Diana disappeared without a trace. And the child he'd wanted to control wanted nothing to do with him. Some mistakes cost everything. Some people don't deserve second chances. And some men learn too late that the greatest strength is recognizing the strength in others, especially in the women who stand beside them. Richard lost a warrior queen because he wanted a servant. Now he has neither. And that's exactly what he deserves. Some prices must be paid in full. Some consequences last forever.